Hey guys, so I wanted to touch upon this topic again, and it's using out-of-state Wyoming LLCs to hold, like your California real estate or Oregon real estate, and the reason it comes up is because I had a client call in the other day and tell me how he was at a real estate investment seminar in California, and some attorney jumped up on stage and started talking and saying, hey, for all you California residents, just go create a Wyoming LLC and put your California real estate directly into this Wyoming LLC. And if you get sued from your real estate property here in California, this can be Oregon also, right? It's the same principle, but, we can just use Wyoming law in these, lawsuits. And this is just the furthest thing from the truth. All this shows is that this attorney has never stepped a day in court, and they have no idea how jurisdiction and lawsuits even apply. And so I want to talk about Wyoming LLCs holding out-of-state real estate, okay? Specifically when it comes to real estate. So the Supreme Court explored the requirement for establishing, where you can be sued in a case called Ford Motor Company. And ultimately they concluded that the, Ford Company's extensive activities in the state that they were actually being sued in created a relationship among the defendant and that state, which was close enough to support specific jurisdiction over them. And again, same thing that we see in the Harley-Davidson case, where the court established that general jurisdiction is going to be established over non-residents, and it's going to exist when the defendant's affiliations with that state are so continuous and systematic to make the defendant essentially at home in that state. And this is the Robinson versus Harley-Davidson Motor Company case in 2013. And these same principles are affirmed again in Cox versus HP in 2021. And so what we're starting to see is a pattern of connection and nexus and closeness, right? So the question comes down to whether there is a connection between the activities of the defendant and the claim that's made by the plaintiff, and if those activities in connection with that out-of-state entity or Wyoming LLC are sufficient to permit, let's say, an Oregon court to exercise specific personal jurisdiction over the defendant or that Wyoming LLC. And this can be, again, a California court as well, or any state. Same principles apply. So when it comes to damages and personal injury and tort liabilities in real estate, this is going to be very, very easy to prove. So let's say, for example, we have an Oregon plaintiff who's an Oregon resident renting out an Oregon property, and that property is owned by a defendant who's also an Oregon resident, and the plaintiff was injured in this Oregon rental property. And, it just happens to be that this Oregon property is held in a Wyoming LLC. Do you honestly think that the courts are going to care about Wyoming law in this Oregon damage case? No, they aren't. That's not how jurisdiction is established. There is no sufficient connection to Wyoming or nexus to Wyoming to invoke Wyoming law. But there's substantial connection to Oregon, right? Now, the courts explained in that Robinson case that under, Supreme Court precedents, a state's exercise of personal jurisdiction over a non-resident must comply with due process if sufficient contacts exist between the defendant and that state, and that it's maintaining suit in that state, and that would not offend the traditional notions of, quotes here, like fair play and substantial justice, right? This is just legal mumbo jumbo. So another way of saying this is that the rule is that due process is satisfied if the defendant's conduct and the connection with the state that they're being sued in is such a way that it would reasonably anticipate that they would be hauled into court in that state. And this again is backed up in that Cox versus HP case. So it's just pretty common sense that even though you have an out-of-state Wyoming LLC holding a piece of like California or Oregon real estate or any other state's property, right, that the jurisdiction of any lawsuit coming from that property will be where the legal connection and nexus is at. And that's going to be where the property and the injury actually occurred at. So it's going to be in that state. So this is why when we're picking which state to set up LLCs in to hold real estate, we pick the state that the property is actually located in.